The hole in the kitchen ceiling dripped a steady patter of gray liquid into a brownie pan strategically set on the linoleum floor. The paint around the hole had pulled away and hung down like blistered skin. I watched from the couch as a chunk of waterlogged drywall gave way, splashing into the brownie pan and throwing a spray of dirty water across the floor. A broken air conditioner blew hot air into the cramped apartment. In the heat of the Boise, Idaho August, sweat ran down my face at almost the same pace as the mystery water dripping from the ceiling. "Yeah, my life is average," Amanda said, pulling a beer from the fridge. "But at least I'm not living out of a backpack." I looked at the corner of the living room where my North Face pack, straining at the seams, leaned against the wall. Even with the sleeping bag roped to the outside, it was so overstuffed that it took both hands and a knee to force the zipper shut. "It's temporary," I said. "That's what all hobos say." Amanda dropped onto the couch, handing me a beer. She was a tall, dirty blonde from Connecticut and had ended up in Boise the same way I had, looking to earn a master's in fine arts and fiction. We both came from the kind of families where you jokingly said vile, sarcastic things to friends and family, the kind of things that if repeated could get you fired, divorced, and excommunicated. It was only natural we'd become the kind of friends that would hurl insults at one another over a bottle of whiskey and come back to do it again the next day. Mostly we argued over writing aesthetics. Amanda wrote finely tuned sentences, words precisely selected and placed with the craftsmanship of an expert jeweler so that each caught the reader's mind the way a perfectly cut diamond caught light. I'd spent the last 3 years polishing dick jokes. Amanda had graduated from the program a year before me, but stayed in Boise to work as an adjunct English professor. Adjunct being ivory tower jargon for day laborer. Adjuncts taught all the classes that none of the full professors wanted to teach for far less pay, with no benefits, no guarantee of future work, and if they complained about any of the shitty working conditions, they found themselves out of a job. The only real difference between day laborers and adjuncts was that you found the former begging for work outside of a Home Depot or Lowe's, and the latter doing the same at coffee houses with bean and brew in their name. To make ends meet, Amanda stocked shelves at Target, leaving her open to the embarrassment of running into her students while dressed as a member of the name tag brigade. As if convincing an hormonal 18-year-old about the importance of sentence structure wasn't hard enough without him catching you on your hands and knees stocking adult diapers. Stocking shelves and adjuncting allowed Amanda the kind of apartment society usually reserved for ex-cons. From the curb, the sprawling 3-story house looked impressive, taking up almost every inch of its North End, Boise, Idaho plot. But the old building had been cut and chopped to create as many claustrophobic one-bedroom cells as possible. Closets became bathrooms, hallway doors grew deadbolts. Her couch, a torn and tattered excuse for furniture, straddled both living room and kitchen. Her apartment might not have been much, but it was still worlds better than what I was doing. Like she said, I was living out of a backpack, secondhand. Hence my interest in her couch and willingness to turn a blind eye to the gray water filling that brownie pan. In the morning, I was going to straddle my Honda Shadow and start a month-long adventure swatting bugs with my face across 4 time zones. I nursed my beer while Amanda drank a concoction of red wine and Coca-Cola, a mix that sounded disgusting to me, but she swore was all the rage in some country I hoped I never had to visit. She took a swig from her glass, pausing to wipe sweat from her forehead. "Let's go drink outside. It might be cooler out there," she said, getting to her feet. "Just keep your voice down. We don't want to disturb the neighbors." We hadn't spoken, had barely sat down on the concrete step when Stacy threw open his door and stepped out onto the courtyard, as if he'd been waiting for an audience. Though courtyard was far too fancy a word for the slab of mislaid concrete littered with milk crates and pressboard furniture and lit by a floodlight bolted above Amanda's door. Stacy swayed with the rhythm of someone who would never risk drinking orange juice without first purifying it with plastic bottle vodka. He was older, late 60s, wearing a Hawaiian shirt unbuttoned to his nipples, with a thick spray of gray pubic-looking chest hair sprouting from the open V. A gold chain around his neck caught the light and winked at me from the forest of crinkly scruff. He marched straight for Amanda and I, coming to a wobbly stop a couple feet away, and immediately launched into a monologue that would give a theater kid a wet dream. Hey, I'm just on my way to visit my lady friend. It's good to see you. I don't think we've met. I'm retired. I used to be a welder, but now I'm retired. What do you do? My kid's a welder too. Taught him everything he knows. My name's Stacy. They gave me a girl's name, but I fought for this country. And he spoke in the kind of stream of consciousness that would give James Joyce a migraine. Thoughts tumbling out of him in less than streamlined one after another way that left his audience scrambling to catch up. His hands trying to translate for the continuous waves of mouth noise flew wildly about, gesturing over his head to the ground left and right. He reminded me of Bugs Bunny conducting an orchestra, only drunk with more fur. I can't stay long. I'm on my way to my lady friend's house. I have a black belt. My daughter, she says I'm the best stick fighter she's ever sparred with. I looked to Amanda for some hint of how the newest thing to come out of Stacy's mouth had anything to do with the thing that came before. She shook her head. There were no transitions, hints, or road signs in Stacy's monologues. It was like he was reaching into a grab bag of random facts and announcing whatever he pulled out. Just as abruptly as he'd launched into his rambling autobiography, he stopped, his arms falling to his sides. He smiled a toothy grin at Amanda and leaned forward so far that I was afraid he was going to faceplant at her feet. You're beautiful, you know that? Oh, geez, Amanda said, hiding her face with the wine soda and studying the cracks in the concrete, the natural reaction of someone in her 20s getting hit on by a drunken 60-something-year-old with a chest full of communally visible pubic hair. No, I mean it. You're a beautiful person and you're a teacher. Do you two have something going? He looked at me holding his palms out. Because I don't want to step on your toes, but she's beautiful. Amanda shook her head. No, we're strictly drinking buddies and literary nemesis. Stacy's face fell as he tried to understand what she'd said, which was only fair considering I hadn't understood a thing that'd fallen out of his mouth since he'd first appeared. Aren't you on your way to your lady friend's house? I asked, trying to move him along. He scowled at me and rubbed at his mouth. I'm not like that. I'm no dog. Not like those other guys. He swept an arm through the air to indicate all the men in Boise or the country or the universe. I wasn't sure. I have 4 or 5 women friends, but I'm no dog. I'm just trying to help them out. Get them on the right track, you know? He bit his lip, then continued. I haven't even consummated a relationship in a year and a half. Maybe you guys are going to consummate tonight? What? Amanda choked on her wine soda, almost spraying a mouthful onto Stacy's bare legs. I probably should have jumped in to defend Amanda's and my plutonic honor, but I was too busy trying to dislodge the mental image of Stacy with his Hawaiian shirt, steel wool chest hair, and gold chain consummating anything. Hey, I'm not judging. Stacy's arm shot up, palms out like he'd wandered into a sobriety checkpoint. You guys are great. It's nice to meet you. You're beautiful. He stage winked, spun on his heel, and marched serpentine out of the courtyard and into the darkness. Amanda studied the cracks in the concrete, and I picked at the soggy label of my Sam Adams as the sound of Stacy's sandals slapping the sidewalk slowly disappeared in the dark. When the sound of rubber smacking concrete had all but vanished, I turned to Amanda. What kind of Muppet show are you living in? She shrugged. Rent's cheap. Rent can't be that cheap, I said, pointing to where Stacy disappeared in the dark. I hope you lock your windows at night because you know he counts you as one of his lady friends, right? Slugging back the last of her wine coke, she stood and opened the door to her sweltering apartment. You talk an awful lot of shit for someone living out of a bindle. It's not a bindle, I said. I don't have a stick. Yeah, because you can't afford one. 3 a.m. found Amanda asleep in her bedroom and me sitting on the couch, elbows on knees, staring at the floor between my feet. It wasn't the couch's mystery stains or the spring that was trying to steal my kidney that had me awake, though admittedly they weren't helping. What had me up in the middle of the night was the thought of the ride I was supposed to start in the morning. From Boise, I planned on heading west to the Pacific coast, down through the redwoods and Grand Canyon, then circling back across the Rockies towards New Hampshire. It'd be a 7,100-mile motorcycle tour, riding 12 hours a day across 19 states and 4 time zones with only a backpack, some borrowed camping gear, and an out-of-date Rand McNally. It was the kind of trip that would ask a lot from even an experienced rider, and I was far from experienced. I'd never ridden more than 200 miles in a single day, and everything I knew about my bike could be summed up as follows. It was red, it was pretty, and every time I rode it, a little voice in my head yelled, "Whee!" I could fill my gas tank and change my oil, but that was about it. I didn't know how to fix a flat or jumpstart a dead battery. Hell, I didn't even know where my battery was. I was 28. unemployed with no prospects, single with no prospects, and about to move back into my parents' house, a terrifying prospect. I just graduated from a Master of Fine Arts program and didn't have a clue what I was supposed to do with myself. The obvious next step was to get a job, but I suffered from the unholy trinity of economic leprosy. First, my MFA was my second degree in unemployability, the other being a bachelor's in English. Regardless of what academic advisors said, having a degree based on the ability to read a book and then talk about it afterwards wasn't what human resources departments like to refer to as a marketable skill. Not once in my life had I gone to a job interview and been asked, could you give a brief overview on the topics of gender and race in Shakespeare's Othello? Instead, it was always, do you own steel-toed boots? How well do you cope with frostbite? Secondly, my resume was a joke. Until teaching in grad school, if I was wearing a shirt with buttons, it meant I was carrying a relative out of a church in a box. Working since I was 15, I'd held the esteemed titles of dirt worker, general laborer, and helper monkey. Whether it was shoveling cow shit, mixing concrete, or lugging asphalt shingles up rickety staging, almost every entry on my resume could be summed up as, me move heavy shit. Completing the trinity, even if I'd had a good resume, it wouldn't have helped because the economy wasn't so much as bull or bear as it was lemming, having hurled itself off a cliff a couple of years earlier. Despite weekly news reports declaring the Great Recession over, the country was still firmly in the crapper with few job openings that didn't require friolator experience. I figured as long as I didn't have a future, I might as well risk it all straddling 600 pounds of unstable machinery whipping around mountain passes. The obvious thing to do, given my total lack of knowledge and general unpreparedness, would have been to roll up my sleeves and do research. I could have gotten my hands on a motorcycle mechanic's manual and taught myself the basics. I could have read accounts of long-distance motorcycle rides so I'd know what to expect. I could have researched specific areas of the country so I'd know and be prepared for each specific hazard. For example, being mauled by a bear in Oregon, being eaten by a meth head in Nevada, or accidentally riding into Kansas. I could have laid out a daily plan, miles to ride, places I'd fuel up, campsites and restaurants, but all that sounded like cheating. If I was going to do something stupid and dangerous, I wasn't going to do homework first. The only thing I did to prepare was find experienced bikers, buy them beer, and pump them for advice. Unlike me, these were men with tens of thousands of miles in the saddle, with years of riding experience who could grow facial hair without looking like a hobo with mange. Every biker that I talked to had a first thing I needed to do. The first thing you need to do is map out your ride, or the first thing you need to do is get yourself some saddlebags, or the first thing you need to do is find some really good rain gear. These were experienced bikers who had hard-earned first-hand knowledge, so I did what any self-respecting 20-something would do. I ignored them. As far as I was concerned, the first thing I needed to do was find a sidekick. If I'd learned anything from watching too many movies, it was that everyone had that one weird friend who'd never really grown up, could drop everything at a moment's notice, and above all else, was willing to do whatever stupid and potentially illegal, immoral, dangerous thing you had in mind. He'd come along for comic relief, moral support, and most importantly, if something terrible was going to happen, the sidekick always got it worse. My sidekick would hitchhike in unmarked vans in meth country, eat food truck shellfish in a state thousands of miles from the nearest sea, and leave his tent flap unzipped, leading to late-night opossum battles. He'd get into trouble with jealous boyfriends in Missouri and an overzealous waitress in Utah. Meanwhile, I'd sit on the sidelines watching the fracas and tossing out the occasional bon mot. As far as I was concerned, finding a sidekick was more important than a helmet. The only problem was I couldn't find mine. My college roommate had become a mechanical engineer for a government contractor and, quote, wasn't at liberty to discuss his work. Both of my brothers were married with children. While both of them had gotten married, had kids, and were buying homes, my last relationship ended over a fight about a pet rodent. Hers, for the record. All my drinking buddies were married, owned their own businesses, or were getting promoted and couldn't take a month off. Even my tequila-drinking 280-pound bouncer friend, who once blacked out and dove through his apartment's second-story window wearing nothing but a pair of boxer briefs, had gotten himself hitched and developed issues with dairy. I invited everyone I could think to join me, but the unanimous response had been, no. I'd gone through the Rolodex in my head 100 times, old drinking buddies, teammates, classmates. Every time I came up empty. It didn't make sense unless 2+ decades of buddy movies and bad TV had lied to me. I should have had at least one man-child friend, someone that didn't have a wife, kids, or career. One of us must have sufficiently failed at adulthood that he could randomly wander the country on a oh shit, it was me. It was me. I was the weird friend. I was the last of the unmarried, still chomping at the bit to do stupid things. We might get arrested, but at least we'll have a story to tell. It was a realization made of equal parts pride and depression. The Germans probably have a word for it. I was making this trip alone, and that's what had me up at 3 a.m., more than the lumpy sofa or the plop plop clunk of ceiling meeting brownie pan. The thought of doing this trip on my own kept me awake. I rubbed my face and stared at my overstuffed pack in the low light. I'd packed and unpacked it so many times that I could name each bulge, pants, rain gear, tent without touching it. Still, I had to fight the urge to dig it all out one last time just to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. The biggest problem with riding solo, besides my total lack of knowledge and skill, was that I had to be completely self-contained, carrying everything I'd need on the trip. Tent, food, clothes, camp stove, fuel, water, rain gear, map, etc., all on my back. Hearing that I was foolish enough to attempt this solo trip, those same bikers I ignored earlier came up with a list of things I'd need: saddlebags for storage, windshield for protection, GPS unit to keep from getting lost, running boards and gel seat for comfort, 9-volt charger to charge my phone for emergencies, leather chaps and jacket to protect my hide from the inevitable crash. Their list went on for pages and thousands of dollars. After some deep thought and reflecting, I managed to winnow their extensive list down to exactly nothing. Zip, zilch. I had valid, articulate arguments for everything that I turned down. You only needed a GPS unit if you knew where you were going, and I had no clue where I was going. Saddlebags were ugly. Windshields were for pussies. Truthfully, all my counter-arguments were veiled attempts to avoid saying I'm poor. At a little over $10K a year, the teaching assistant stipend I'd been living off for the past 3 years didn't leave me in a position where I could afford amenities like food, shelter, and laundry, let alone customizing my motorcycle. Instead of buying thousands of dollars worth of equipment, I picked up a used hiking pack for $20. My secondhand North Face had shoulder straps, a kidney belt, and a mess of buckles and zippers that appeared to be randomly thrown on. Fully loaded, weighed a little over 50 pounds. Inside was a collapsible camp stove, cooking pot, tent, all borrowed, fuel bottle for the stove, outdated road atlas, rain gear, oatmeal, and spare clothes. Into the side pockets, I'd stuffed a steel canister that held an extra 3/4 gallon of gasoline and a water bottle. With no room inside, I strapped on the sleeping bag, also borrowed, as best I could. In my pants, I carried my flip phone and a 3-inch knife that snapped open impressively with the flick of my thumb. It had come in handy in case I had to knife fight a black bear over my apple cinnamon instant oatmeal, or, more realistically, wanted to accidentally cut myself in a late night panic attack over some strange noise outside my tent. With all my camping and storage needs taken care of as cheaply as possible, I only had to worry about my riding gear. And when it came to motorcycle gear, leather was king. Leathers had become the standard uniform for anyone on 2 wheels, and everyone who bought a bike immediately ran out to the local fetish hut to stock up on assless chaps. I assumed it was because all that black bovine hide made the orthodontists and podiatrists riding $30,000 Harleys feel like they were real badass bikers. They wore leather boots, gloves, chaps, jackets, and as if that weren't enough, deceased cow, some edged all of that in leather tassels, which served no purpose other than to flutter like butterfly wings in a spring breeze. So much for badass. But I don't understand why I had to wrap myself in dead cow in order to be a biker. I had nothing against leather on a moral ground. I shared the common belief that animals were put on this earth to feed us, clothe us, and alert us when clumsy children fell down wells. I just didn't like leather because it was expensive, hot, heavy, and if worn too long, smelled like a used jockstrap. To be fair, leather was rugged and water resistant, 2 important features for bikers. It was good protection if a rider dumped his bike, good meaning it would protect against road rash, but you still had a shattered spine. Even if I could afford it, I couldn't see myself dressing like the biker from the Village People. At least not when I had a closet full of Carhartt left over from my hard hat days. I wore Carhartt canvas pants, a blanket-lined Carhartt jacket, and Carhartt work gloves. Fully dressed, I looked nothing like the biker from the Village People. I looked exactly like the construction worker from the Village People who also happened to ride a motorcycle. My final piece of gear was a 6-year-old full-face helmet that smelled like an old gym bag. It had a clear plastic shield that could be flipped out of the way to better let bugs hit me in the face and made me feel like a bobblehead in a wind tunnel whenever I broke 60. Across the country, there'd been a lot of debate about whether or not helmets should be mandatory. Living up to its live free or die motto, my home state of New Hampshire had no helmet law, one of only 3 states in 2011. It was also the only state in the union with no seatbelt law for anyone over the age of 18, which made people want to change the state motto from live free or die to go ahead, kill yourself, see if we care. The whole helmet argument boiled down to safety versus comfort. Statistically, it was safer to wear a helmet than to ride bareheaded, but helmets were uncomfortable. They were hot, sweaty, and turned a rider's head into a giant windbreak, making it a strain on your neck just to keep your head on your shoulders. In a lot of ways, wearing a helmet while riding was like wearing a condom while having sex. It was fun and all, but in the back of your mind, you knew it could feel much better. Fans of helmet laws pointed out the fact that, according to the CDC in 2010, 42% of bikers who died in accidents weren't wearing helmets. That sounded like an impressive statistic until you realized that meant 58% of people who died in motorcycle crashes were wearing them. And despite what the Princess Bride would have you believe, there is no such thing as mostly dead. Climbing onto an unstable 2-wheeled vehicle and whipping around the countryside was inherently dangerous, and there wasn't much that could be done to change that. Even if you were stone sober, obeyed every traffic law, and used your directionals like God intended, the roads were still filled with random deer, patches of loose sand, and assholes driving SUVs while clipping their toenails. Personally, I wore my helmet because even butterflies hurt at 70 miles an hour, and I didn't want to find out what it felt like to hit a June bug or a pine tree. Also, like all true bikers, I was afraid of my mother. I gave my pack one last look and laid back down on the couch, trying to keep bare skin from touching any of the fresher stains. In the morning, having survived the night without the ceiling falling or Stacy crawling through an open window, I said goodbye to Amanda, shouldered my pack, and straddled my bike. I rode down to the end of her road and pulled to a stop with my bike facing west. A steady line of cars rushed past in either direction, keeping me scanning left and right for an opening. I was so focused on the upcoming traffic that I almost didn't notice the storm clouds roiling above. Up until that point, the sky had been blue and the weather spotless, but now the clear blue turned black-purple. The clouds glowed from inside as electricity hopped from one to the other, looking for a way to the ground. Lightning ripped down into the shrub-covered foothills. The growl of distant thunder was loud enough to make its way to me over the rumbling engine and through my helmet. A wall of rain advanced forward at the front edge of the storm, soaking the high desert soil and making the scrub brush dance and shake. Gusts of wind slapped at the nearby treetops and shoved against me like a schoolyard bully. I sat frozen on my bike, watching the bruised sky push closer and closer. Not 10 minutes into the trip, and I already didn't know if I should call it quits for the day or just push ahead. 2 distinct parts of my personality were arguing with each other. They weren't separate personas. It wasn't as if one was a spittoon cleaner from 1876 Wyoming and the other a grizzled sea captain with a lucky hermit crab for a first mate, though if I ever go insane, those are the 2 I hope to develop. They were just the main aspects of my personality. One was the angry, cynical side that believed everything was going to end badly, people sucked, and I should be allowed to hunt them for sport, which, while terrible, was at least better than thinking I should be allowed to hunt them for food. The other was my naively positive side that believed everything was cool and would work out all right. People were generally good and would do the right thing if given the opportunity. If I didn't balance them out, the first would land me in jail and the second would have me bound and gagged in the back of some stranger's van. As the black clouds overhead flashed from a couple million volts of electricity crackling inside, I argued with myself. Screw this, call it a day. It's not that bad. What do you mean not that bad? Lightning plus motorcycle equals that bad. The odds of getting struck by lightning while riding a motorcycle have to be infinitesimally small. First, you've always sucked at math, so I'm not sure how much I trust you on that. Second, the odds get a hell of a lot better when you're dumb enough to ride a motorcycle under a pissed-off sky. Quit being dramatic. The sky isn't pissed off. It's just a quick summer storm. I'll be through it before I even know it. Or you could sit around warm and dry, drinking while waiting for it to pass. It'll be fine. Besides, I can't afford another day in Boise. You know what else you can't afford? Hospital bills. I'm going to have to ride through rough weather at some point. I might as well get used to it, but you don't have to ride through this particular storm. I'm anxious to get going. I'm anxious to avoid dying. A little rain never killed anyone. Yeah, but hydroplaning into a bridge abutment has. I've ridden through rain before. What's the worst that could happen? The term colostomy bag comes to mind. Realistically, the worst that's going to happen is I get drenched and have to change my clothes. If that sky gets any worse, I'm going to have to change my pants before the rain even hits me. I'll be fine. I stepped down on the shifter, putting the bike in first gear, and was just about to cut out into traffic when a perfect caricature of a lightning bolt, it was long and jagged and could have been the symbol for Tampa Bay's hockey team, split the sky directly in front of me. On second thought, one more night in Boise couldn't hurt.